Girls, there's a new bar open. Why don't we go out tonight? Suggested Claire, the only unmarried person in the group. She'd had terrible luck with relationships. From drug addict to gambler to idiot, and she'd lived to the age of 32 without ever getting married. There were 4 of them in the company, Mary and Lisa, both in their 40s, long married. Each with 3 children, and finally Christine, the youngest of them, 24 years old, married a year ago at the Handsome Tom. They looked great together. Both were very handsome. Immediately after their marriage, they moved to a small town that was fed by 2 local factories. Their Christina's spouse was offered a high position and a huge salary. Being the youngest, she was the most attractive of all. Searing brunette with a bob, tall and slender. A lot of male colleagues tried to hit on her in order to take the position of lover, but Christina was not interested. She and her husband sincerely loved each other. Often, but not every Friday, the girls went out to some bar, a little drink, dance and flirt with guys. It was Chris who got the most attention. She danced gracefully and seductively, everyone in the bar staring at the curves of her body in motion. Claire, on the other hand, was just trying to find someone to be in a relationship with, and would sometimes go off with some guy. Mary and Lisa got attention more from older men and lovers of larger forms, but never crossed the line. Christina just warned her husband that it would be too late. They trusted each other completely. Sometimes they were jealous of each other, but there was no special reason for it. On Fridays, Tom and Self liked to go to a bar or computer club with his colleagues. Quickly taking the reserved seat, the girls had a few glasses of white and went to the dance floor. As always, Chris was on top of her game. She could dance alone by herself, but she preferred to dance with Claire. The guys would come over to them and try to dance with them, but the girls didn't care about them. After a couple of dances, they came back to the table, sat there for a while, had a drink, smoked, and went on again. But Mary and Lisa stayed at the table and looked at the men at the next table. Later, they joined them. Once again, all eyes were on the 2 girls, especially Chris. They danced with each other so synchronized and coordinated that it seemed like they had been dancing together all their lives. Today, she was wearing a black top with an open belly and a business jacket, and the sky-colored skirt suited her very well. After a couple of dances, Claire needed to go to the ladies' room, and with a shout in Christina's ear, she left. However, Christina was already on a roll, hearing nothing but the music, her eyes closed, her body only moving to the beat of the music. He had been looking at her for a long time and couldn't take his eyes off her. The whiskey in the glass was quickly drying up. He ordered again and again. Now he had reached the right condition and headed towards her. As he made his way through the groups of people, he was getting bolder and bolder. And after pushing away 2 she guys who didn't have the courage to come closer, he stands a couple of centimeters away from Chris. She suddenly comes to her senses a little. The smell of his blue burn nose, it was such a masculine scent. Why doesn't my Tom use that instead of his semi-feminine perfume? Ran through her head. She started to slow down and wanted to see whoever was wearing that scent. There was a tall, broad guy standing in front of her, showing what kind of man he was. In front of such, even the strongest woman's legs shake. Taking his breath away, he gets what he wants. Christina involuntarily began to approach him, dancing. The guy smiled, moving a little at the same pace as his partner. He touched her and quietly turned her back to him. Chris was a little confused, but just continued to move in rhythm. Being on a wave, she didn't really notice anything around her. Usually he acts much more decisive, but the ring on his ring finger made him cautious. After waiting a couple minutes, he put one hand on her waist and the other on Christine's stomach, then took a small step and pressed himself against her. Chris's body was no longer under the control of the strong male. His hands roaming her body, he was already sure that this night he would not spend alone. and deciding to savor his prey a little, he slipped his hand under her top. Christine's desire peeped, and she turned around, wrapped her arms around her partner's neck, and dug her lips into Vi's. They had been kissing for a couple minutes now, and he decided it was time they had some privacy. Full of confidence in her agreement, he said, "Let's go to my place." Christine almost said yes, but she saw his face. He was not her husband at all. In a split second, she sobered up. She marshaled the entire chain of events, pulled her hand out from under his clothes, removed his hand, and backed away. Fixing her look, she made her way through the crowd to her co-workers while thoughts of how did it come to this ran through her head. Sitting down at her table, she emptied her glass in a volley. Her co-workers looked at her with a smirk, cleared dance next to her, and left before Christina kissed the stranger. Mary and Lisa calmed the young co-worker down, reassuring her that it was no big deal. Having more or less come to her senses, Christina told all. The girls laughed, but also saw nothing wrong with it. Even on the contrary, pushed to go away with him. Mary and Lisa argued while there are admirers, you need to have fun. With the husband will always have time, and when you get 40, you'll regret it. Being a little drunk, Christina even began to think perhaps they were right. She looked around the hall and the bar, not seeing him, even a little sad. Had another drink and picked up her phone to call it cab home. However, when she saw that she could walk home in about 10 or 15 minutes, she decided to walk. She came out of the bar. There were crowds of drunk people standing at the entrance, shouting, laughing, and smoking. Fixing her look, she strode toward the house, clomping on her heels. He stood smoking. Away from the main mass through the noise of the crowd, he heard the sound of heels and couldn't believe his luck. It was her. He was already at a loss as to how to approach her. And then she came. Without thinking, he followed her. He had to find the right words if he didn't want to spend the night alone, but he was lucky. She was approached by two tipsy guys in a small alley. They didn't notice him as he was walking in a sufficient distance and started to harass him. By the time he reached them, they had already managed to pin her against the wall. They weren't happy for long. Two lightning-fast blows, and there they lay, writhing in pain. "Girl, are you all right? Cover yourself, please. I won't hurt you. They're lying over there already." He tried to be caring. Chris was panicked, but the kind voice calmed her down. She covered herself, stood up, and shook herself off. It wasn't until a couple minutes later that she was able to think and speak. "Thank you, young man." Chris didn't recognize him. "You're welcome. My name is Michael. And you're a very good dancer." Chris stiffened and remembered everything at once, but she couldn't be angry. "Walk me out. I'm scared." "Sure. And what's your name? Do you live far away?" Her scent intoxicated him. "I'm Christina." They walked slowly and talked about something, but they both remembered the dance. He dreamed of her inviting him to her house for tea to thank him for saving her, but he was well aware that her husband was waiting for her home, and so they reached her yard. "Now hold on, please." Christina pulled out her cell phone and began to call her husband. "Sure, I'll wait." He admired her with a slight smile. She only smiled sweetly back. Then, no answer. "I think I fell asleep. Walk me up to the 4th floor. I'm still drunk. I'm afraid I'll fall on the stairs. And they haven't fixed the elevator yet." Without noticing it, she shot her eyes, and her gaze was quite different, as if inviting. He couldn't help but notice and immediately agreed. They went into the entrance. The elevator door had a sign not working on it. As they approached the stairs, Christina leaned on his arm, and they began to climb the stairs. She was still a little drunk, but she was more intoxicated by the scent of his perfume, which made her cling harder to him without noticing it. Floor after floor, so they reached the 3rd. He realized it was either now or never, so he gathered courage. And so, finding himself between the 3rd and 4th floor, He pressed her against the wall and kissed her passionately on the lips. She was a little confused for a second, but almost immediately wrapped her arms around him and began to respond to the kisses. Michael didn't even think that the girl who drove him crazy would make love to him right outside her house, where her husband was waiting for her. There's no telling how it would have still ended if it wasn't for the noise of a door opening 2 floors up and voices. Upon hearing it, Chris immediately started to get ready to go home. Michael was satisfied with what he had gotten today and too tired to coach a second round, and only watched as the married girl tidied herself up. Just as she stepped on to the first step, he grabbed her. "Give me your number." He decided he wanted more with her, but not now. "Let go. I can't be seen with you." Chris panicked. "But give me your number and go write mine down." Michael tightened his grip slightly, letting her know that she wasn't going to get away that easily. Christina understood and, opening her purse, began searching for her phone. The remnants of her mind had not left her, and she was aware that it was better to write down the number than to give her own. However, footsteps and voices of people were getting closer, and Christina, taking Michael's hands, ran down the stairs. 2 arches led into the side of the apartment stairs, and between them was the space where the residents left their children's bicycles and strollers. And now there was a young married girl, covering the man's mouth, listening to the neighbors from upstairs slowly descend. They stood there for a couple more minutes. Michael had already regained his strength. So one more time, Michael smirked and started undoing the buttons on his skirt. "No, I gotta go. I don't want to get knocked up." She tried to be serious, but she couldn't wipe the smile off her face. "Do you have the pill, or are you hoping it'll pass? I can go if I need to." "Yeah, I have some at home." And they, without a moment's hesitation, did it all over again. But Michael didn't want to let her go at all. Grabbing her cell phone, he entered his phone number and called himself. When they were done, Christina more or less cleaned herself up and went home. Tom was asleep, so she put all of her clothes in the wash, popped some pills, and shut herself in the shower. There was no way she could understand what had happened today. It seemed she had been very easily cheated out of her first betrayal. It was easy to justify herself. She drank a little in a fit of passion during the dance. She led a little too much. On the way home he saved her, and the husband fell asleep. If he had not slept, nothing would have happened. So and all the blame remained her husband, who fell asleep, and she only showed a momentary weakness. Already in bed, she convinced herself that she had forgotten to delete his number and fell asleep. It was hard for her to admit to herself that she had enjoyed it. It had been a long time since she'd given herself to someone with such frantic desire, and she wasn't sure if it was the last time. Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put likes, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel.